everyone, this is Eflex and welcome back to another A Producer's Approach video. In this video we're going to be looking at Maduk Vandera's song Never Stop Loving You. This is a drum and bass song on Liquicity, and just to go into the beginning of the video, so basically the basic structure for these videos is my intro section and personal story. Then after that I go into the breakdown and analysis section. And then after that, I outro the song, just giving my final thoughts on the overall song. So let's get into the intro section. So this song is Never Stop Loving You by Maduk Vandera. So Maduk is a artist I really got into actually only maybe 3 years ago. I mean, I've heard his music all these years, but I never really looked up his stuff. I only saw his stuff because it came out on Liquicity and Liquicity every once in a while, and I clicked on it. But I didn't really go and seek out his music. But I really did myself a disservice for a good amount of years because Maduk is one of my favorite drum and bass artists at the moment that's not on Monstercat. I'm not exactly sure if he had a remix on Monstercat, but if he hadn't so far, I'm kind of surprised he never made it onto Monstercat, considering, you know, Faint's there, Muzzy is there, Coven's there, Flight or Justin Hawks Now is there, and they all came from Liquicity. So just kind of interesting how he's not on, or he never really made it onto Monstercat. But either way, his music's really good. His other songs like Ghost Assassin VIP is really good. Vermilion is one I really like. There's some more modern ones like Poison from his new album. One song with this artist named Lexurus, I can't remember off the top of my head what the name is, but his new album or EP is really good. But coming back to Never Stop Loving You, I listened to the song in 2014, and I think this was the first time I think I'd ever heard a saxophone solo in a drum and bass song. And around this time I was like a really dedicated Liquicity follower. Not that I don't listen to Liquicity's releases now, but now it's more like every once in a while I listen to them. But back then it was like Monstercat, where I listened to like every single song, every single release right when it came out. Like I'll try and listen to it, if not like when I feel like first thing I get home, and then like, you know, I'll listen to the song. So this is one of the early songs by Maduk, and it's definitely a really memorable song for me in terms of, I think, the saxophone section and just the vocal chops in the song. So Maduk's style is like a really good blend between melodic and liquid drum and bass. It's not an easy balance to do, but Maduk's one of the few artists that I've seen pull it off really well. Some other artists I think that might be similar to it might be the artists, I think they're a duo, T and Sugar, but even them, like, I'm not as sure because I haven't listened to a lot of their songs. Like I know right now on Liquicity, like I would say my highest ranked artist is probably Maduk. So I didn't even realize back then in 2014 that his music was that good, but you know, eventually I learned, so that's something good to know. So if you guys don't know, drum and bass is normally made at 174 BPM. I explained that in my other video reviewing that Andromatic song. And basically, you know, drum and bass can range from 170 to 180, but the sweet spot that a lot of producers use is 174. I've used 174 as well when producing drum and bass. Just seems like a sweet spot, BPM or beats per minute, so, or tempo. So just seems to work. And we'll get into the breakdown of the song now. So let's go. So just to stop it here, where I just want to acknowledge that drum and bass also has kind of a traditional structure like house songs and electro songs, where they kind of have a percussion intro, or it's like a kick and a snare. The drum and bass pattern is a little bit different, where the kick is on one, the snare is on two, and then the next kick is kind of offbeat a little bit, and then the snare is on four. So I think like you would say like a little bit off the third beat, like a 1 1/3 offbeat kick, and then a snare. It's really hard to explain when you're not on the grid, but basically there's like drum and bass kind of has their own rhythm, and they have like a similar structure where in, house, they have like either a 30-second, 15-second, or a minute kind of intro. Sometimes 45 seconds, but that's pretty rare. Drum and bass has that too, where they kind of introduce like the percussion playing, and then they have kind of a, like this sound, there's like a pluck saying, like playing along kind of slowly, progressing up into what will be the break. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there is kind of like a traditional intro and outro to drum and bass songs, as well as house and electro songs. So now there was the sample Never Stop Loving You, and some jazzy sounds, I think the saxophone sounds, so we'll keep going. So for this song, it's like a 45-second intro, but there were a lot of different vocal chops, and the Never Stop Loving You, and the oh yeah, yeah. I don't know, when I listen to drum and bass, it sounds like there's a lot of kind of soul music inspiration in there. I mean, the vocals seem kind of like there's a lot of kind of like soul music kind of mixed in with drum and bass. Pretty interesting. I don't know, that's just maybe what I noticed, but yeah, the plucks kind of eventually, got louder, and then Maduk's plucks, at least in a lot of his songs within this era, and maybe even the more current songs, they're really clean. I really like his plucks in the songs. They just kind of keep the flow going, and they, I don't know, always sound good, so nothing to complain about there. So let's keep going. Cool, so there was kind of a break from the intro, and the plucks were playing, and then they had the kind of different vocal chops coming in. You could tell there was a lot of delay and reverb on them, and then eventually transition to this section where there's the percussion kind of coming back, and then there's kind of more sounds being introduced that I think will eventually be in the drop, but there's just kind of the introduction in this break to the eventual build up into the drop. So the plucks kind of are the constant sound playing, but you kind of hear that they kind of evolve and have more timbre or more fullness, and vary from just like a high end pluck to maybe having a little bit more low end. So you just kind of hear the plucks evolve. I think this song in itself is pretty minimal, so the drop's not going to be like, brighter per se, in terms of like a Two Friends reference, or I guess you would say kind of like Famous for Archie. It's not going to be like a big kind of pumping drop kind of like those two songs. It's going to be more of a kind of minimal kind of flowy drop, so you'll see it as it builds up. So as you notice there, that was the build up. It built up a little bit. There was kind of a synth sound coming in. There was kind of a kind of higher pitch sound coming in as a riser, but it's not as prominent as the second drop into the Alesso Cool Song Two Friends remix. Like that second drop was like really prominent, like in that remix from Two Friends. Like it was really prominent, like, oh, it's building, and then it's gonna drop. This song was kind of like, oh, more like a Uvik, where it kind of just transitioned. There wasn't as big of like a build or emphasis on the build up into the transitioning drop. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, we'll transition kind of quick and then we'll go kind of into the drop, which for this song works because it's not like a really big impactful drop. It's just kind of a more minimal drop. So as you notice, you'll hear. And one of the main things that makes me remember this song, besides the vocal chops used in the song, is the saxophone and the jazzy elements in the song. So you'll hear it pretty soon. I think the lead sound is going to be a saxophone. So alright, so that's kind of interesting. I was pretty much wrong. That is a trumpet playing. For some reason, all these years, I always thought it was a saxophone playing, but listening to it more closely, that's actually a trumpet playing, which in itself is really cool. The trumpet's not blaring, it's kind of a lower sound, but it's a really nice touch to this song. It gives it a totally different vibe. At least to me, it gives it a more jazzy kind of feel when you kind of introduce more brass instruments into the song. You kind of notice how the plucks kind of fluctuate to having more timbre and then kind of fading out to have less timbre, so having more, like covering more space in the mix and then kind of fading out, and then kind of transitions into the kind of trumpet lead solo thing section. And then now in this section, like Maduk has kind of like a pulsing synth. I noticed a lot of his songs, like Vermilion, I think he made it this time, like he had kind of like a almost like a pulsing synth sound going on with the percussion and the drop. But you notice that the drop section, like it's kind of the same kind of drum loop, which isn't bad, but it's kind of like a fast moving percussion, but there's not too much variation and it's really minimal sounding. It's not like really big, like punchy snares or really big claps. It's really kind of just, kind of a kick, snare, some hi-hats, but it's just kind of like a more minimal sounding, maybe more almost acoustic sounding percussion, I guess, because for liquid drum and bass, it's more kind of acoustic sounding percussion, and there's not too many sounds being played at the same time, but those sounds that are being played are a lot more clear and defined. So when making music, at least for me, it's harder to make music with less sounds than more sounds, which sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes you can get away with masking different sounds by layering different sounds. But when you only emphasize certain sounds, you really have to pick the correct sounds and make those sounds shine, since you're not using a large amount, since you're using like a limited amount in a sense. So you have to really make the sounds you choose shine, otherwise the mix will sound way off. So you'll kind of hear that in this mix and in other liquid drum and bass songs. cool. So there was like a dun, 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 like there kind of has he had kind of like a ARP lead, kind of like that, a little arpeggiated lead. And then I thought I heard like a white noise sound somewhere in there, kind of transitioning a little bit in between, like during the drop, just to give it a little extra flow. Thought I heard that, but I do kind of like how he kind of threw in the ooh yeah yeah and the never stop loving you kind of vocal, like little vocal phrases or vocal chops, almost like. Those are really nice additions in the song, just to, add kind of a splash of vocal and a little extra vocals into the flow and to the differentiating sounds in the drop and the mix. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, let's keep going. That section is actually pretty interesting. There's the pulsating synths, and there's a kind of pluck sound go dun 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 dun. There was a sound like that also playing along, which is pretty interesting because it kind of stops when it transitions in this part. So I guess it was just an extra little arp to give the flow into that section, because just another added sound to complete the flow, because I'm not exactly sure if there was a ton of percussion happening within that kind of break section. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, let's keep going. All right, so you notice after that transitionary point, the synths and the kick itself, they kind of almost sound muted, so they're like lower in volume, and also sounds like they're filtered. Throughout kind of that whole section, it kind of builds up, and then as it builds up, the white noise sound happens, and then like the vocal, you notice never lowers really in volume, kind of like the vocal chop or the vocal kind of sample of Never Stop Loving You or Ooh Yeah Yeah. You notice those vocal samples don't really lower in volume, like they kind of stay at a consistent volume, whereas the percussion that's slowly being reintroduced back into the song, and the synths too, they're lower in volume to kind of build up, so when it does kind of transition and drop here, like they're not filtered anymore, so you kind of hear the full sound of the percussion and the synths, and you kind of get kind of that feeling of boom. So that's just kind of an interesting to observe and hear and listen to. So definitely something to note when you're building up into the song. So that's a technique I think so far I haven't really heard yet. I've normally heard like a build up in snares to where it's a really punchy snare and then kind of fades out, or the percussion's like has a low pass filter, so you hear the low sounds and then you eventually hear like the full kick going into like a higher frequency and then dropping. But I've never so far seen a build up with the percussion and the synths for that whole time of the build kind of being filtered to where you don't really hear them, and all of a sudden just kind of unfilters and you hear the full thing in the drop. So that's cool. Cool. I like that section. So the first part of the drop was similar to the first drop in that section, but this section kind of stops the kick, gives a little breather, it introduces the kind of synth sound to kind of play in this section. Pretty nice transition there. I like when artists kind of give kind of a brief second where the kick comes out, they introduce that sound, and then it comes back in to introduce. Pretty smooth transition always. So I will say, in this section where the trumpet is playing, it does sound like an actual person recorded the trumpet, and that could be Vandera. Not to say that Vandera isn't a music producer too. I don't know much about Vandera's music. I know Maduk more, but Vandera could have been the one playing the trumpet, because the trumpet sounds like someone playing a trumpet into a microphone, because you can hear the different kind of accents kind of playing like like the staccatoed accents playing in the trumpet, where you could have brass sounds in the synthesizer. You can't really get the accents quite like that, so it sounds like a real live trumpet was played, and that was maybe like the best section of the loop, or the lead audio loop that they probably recorded that sounded the best, and it does really transition well in that section. So I think this section we'll see when the song ends. Alright, so that is Maduk and Vandera's song Never Stop Loving You. So for that outro, it's pretty interesting. That after the trumpet solo or lead part, it's pretty similar with kind of the pulsating synth sounds. It almost sounds like they kind of filter up and filter down, or there's like an oscillator with the LFO kind of like pulsating them to go like have a more pronounced sound and then maybe come back and not, just from my guess. But it's interesting to note in this outro that there's no kind of kick snare outro, kind of like the beginning had like a 45-second intro kind of percussion thing with the vocal sample and the pluck, but in this outro it just kind of ends right there. So that's pretty interesting. With other songs, they normally have a outro section with percussion just to kind of outro and keep that structure, but I don't know if the actual song does, or if this was kind of an ex-keto edit for the song, since this video is 4 minutes and 51 seconds and another 45 seconds. Might be a pretty long video, like a 5-minute video. Not exactly sure. I don't want to assume what it is, but for now we'll just say, based on this video, that the song ends without an outro, percussion outro, which is very non-traditional for a drum and bass song, and for an EDM song in general. Usually if they start with a traditional intro, they finish with a traditional percussion outro, so that's just different. But overall, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but the pluck sound that the song starts with is pretty much the driving force and the driving sound throughout the whole song. Like, the pluck may change in terms of sound, like it might have more timbre, less timbre, but for most of the song you kind of hear that same pluck play throughout the song, whether like the volume lowers on it, or it's more prominent or less prominent, has more low end or less low end. Like, it's pretty much a pretty consistent sound through the whole song. So for me, I'd say the pluck sound was the driving force of the whole flow of the song, but or the core sound of the song. But overall, I mean, I really like the song. I love the use of the vocal chops and the vocal samples. I love that trumpet solo. That's actually what makes me remember the song, as well as the vocal samples used in the song, and the core pluck sound. I do like that, but just the overall feel and the trumpet solo pretty much bring me back to the song, because there aren't many drum and bass songs that use how would I want to say it, jazz instruments in their songs in the way in which this song does, where they recorded an actual jazz or live instrument and implement it in the song. At least for me, when an artist does that, I tend to remember their song a little bit more than if it's fully synthetic. Now, most of my songs are fully synthetic. Most sounds I use are in-house plugins, stock plugins, sounds I made. But like Temanite and Hot Date and stuff, like there's songs on Monster Cat and Christen where they kind of had a realistic guitar section, and where Temanite had his saxophone. When you hear songs use live instruments like that, that to me is like another element that's really good in a song. So I don't know, for me personally, I like it when artists use that. So overall, this is Maduk and Vandera's song Never Stop Loving You. If you guys haven't checked out Maduk's music, feel free to look on YouTube, but this song again will be in the description. And if you like this video, feel free to comment whether you like it or dislike it. And overall, go check out Maduk's stuff. Alright everyone, this is my analysis. Hope you guys learned something, and have a good one. Peace.